Long time no see.
Long time no see.
Exactly. Did you enjoy your first use of force meeting?
No,
That
the
was
second one.
that was my
Was that your
second.
second? Oh,
No.
very good. Very good. I must have missed the first one. So, all right. Wonderful. It's 5:30. If you're all ready, we will get started. So, all right. We will call to order our fourth council meeting for 2021. And excited to meet together. We have a long agenda, so we have a lot of different things to go over. But I did have 3 people that I invited to participate in our opening ceremony, and they all said they would love to participate except for this week. So we have some things to look forward to in the future. But since it was President's Day yesterday, I thought I would take the liberty of doing the opening ceremony myself. Jeff, if you would mind bringing up that letter that I shared with you. Now, this is a letter from George Washington, and it's dated the 27th of December, 1776. And this is not the exact letter, but it's a copy of it. And it comes through, I can see it there on my screen. It comes through really pretty well. And this is shortly after the crossing of the Delaware. And what I think struck me the most about this letter from George Washington is how gorgeous his handwriting is. So not only is the letter significant historically for the information that it provides to us, but I'm thinking of him sitting in a tent with a table and a chair, if he's lucky, writing this. And his handwriting is just absolutely gorgeous. And it really stood out to me. What a unique and remarkable person this is that can write like this under the conditions that they were in. In the letter, it describes what they had to do to cross the Delaware on Christmas night, basically on the 26th of December at midnight. They all got in small boats to cross the Delaware, and they had to fight ice. And it took them a lot longer to get across the river than they anticipated because of all the ice that they had to deal with. Once they got there, they had a 3-mile hike to get to Trenton. And they hiked the 3 miles. They left at midnight. They were hoping to be there at 5 o'clock in the morning to battle with the English. And it took them so long to get across the river that they had to change plans. They got there a little bit later. But many of these soldiers, as they hiked through the snow for these 3 miles, they didn't even have boots. They didn't even have shoes, and they had wrapped their feet in towels and in clothing to march these 3 miles. Now, the Revolutionary Army at that point, they had not done very well. They had not fared well against the British, and so for them to tramp through the snow and engage the British at the point that they did, and they pretty much caught them unawares. This was a big turning point for the Revolutionary War, where they were able to take over this garrison in Trenton and basically confiscate a lot of supplies that they really needed. And it was a turning point morale-wise as well too for the Army, and they started to have success after that. But I thought it would be fun to share these experiences that our very first president, George Washington, had, and a letter of his written in his own hand for President's Day this year. So I just wanted to share that with you. So thank you. Moving on. Got a statement I've got to read here. So based on in compliance with the Utah Code 52-4-207, I, Mark A. Anderson, as chair of the Logan Municipal Council, make the following determination in order to hold an electronic meeting without an anchored location. Based on the rising cases of COVID-19 in the Bear River Health District and State Public Health Order 2020-18, adopting COVID-19 transmission area restrictions, categorizing our county designation as a high transmission area, it is determined that gathering in person for the regular city council meeting is a risk to the health and safety of those present. According to corona.utah.gov, people at higher risk for severe illness include older adults, people of all ages with certain underlying medical conditions, and pregnant people might also be at increased risk of severe illness from COVID-19. Longstanding systemic health and social inequities have put many people from racial and ethnic minority groups at increased risk of getting sick and dying from COVID-19. Given that members of the council and community who are required to be in attendance or may choose to attend have these risk factors, a virtual meeting without an anchor location will be held via Zoom. Logan Municipal Council meetings are televised live as a public service on Channel 17, Logan's City of Logan Facebook page at www.facebook.com/City of Logan. To listen to the meeting by phone, call 1-669-900-9128. All right. At this point, I would accept a motion for approval of minutes and of the agenda.
I move acceptance of the minutes and the agenda for tonight.
I'll second that.
Excellent. We've had a motion and a second. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Minutes have been approved and the agenda approved as well too. Our 2021 regular meeting schedule is the first and third Tuesdays at 5:30 p.m. and our next meeting is on March 2nd, 2021. Can you believe it's almost March? It's kind of crazy. So questions and comments for the mayor and council. This agenda item is suspended until we can once again have in-person meetings, which we hope will be fairly soon. In the meantime, please email comments to teresa.harris@loganutah.org, who will distribute them to the mayor and to the council members. I just wanted to say briefly, thanks to Teresa and also to Esley for having our first agenda in Spanish. Isn't that nice? So I thought that was great.
Thank you. Very much appreciated.
Yeah, so hopefully the next version will be a little bit easier. After you do it once, it always becomes a lot easier. So, but I thought that was great. And I think that's something we can continue into the future. So next up, Mayor Daines, you have a board appointment for us.
I do. Logan City and Cache County jointly operate the airport, known as the Airport Authority, and we have a variety of members on that board. One of the representatives is Gar Walton, who does live in Logan. He's one of our appointments. So he has served on that committee for a while, but given his expertise, I would like to reappoint him. So if I could have a ratification by council, if they accept that, that would be appreciated.
I know Gar Walton very well, and I think he will serve very well, has served very well in the past. So I would nominate ratification.
I would second that.
Second. Any discussion from the council? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of ratification for Gar Walton, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Excellent. We've approved ratification for Gar Walton. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Vice Chair Simmons, you have a Planning Commission update for us.
I will say that the only item on Planning Commission is an item that we will discuss later. We will be workshopping the Deer Pen subdivision. So what I can say is that there was a great deal of discussion. We've also received a letter from Michael Timmons with some additional suggestions regarding the park that is to the west, and perhaps some restrictions on the western side of, the western side of lots. But I'm sure we'll go over all of that when we workshop it later in the meeting.
Did everyone get a copy of that email?
Yes, I did.
You did? Okay. I see thumbs up. So, all right. Excellent. Thank you, Jeannie. Thanks for doing that. Let's see. We've got some action items coming up on our agenda here. Due to our meeting restrictions because of COVID-19, if you want to make public comments on any item, there's two options. One, you can email comments to teresa.harris@loganutah.org, who will distribute them to the mayor and council members. I think we have received a couple emails for tonight. Hope everybody got those. Although you may send email questions and comments during the public hearing portion of the meeting, to guarantee they will be distributed to the council before the meeting, please submit those before Monday, February 15th at 5 o'clock. There we go. All right. Also, the second option is if you join the meeting via Zoom, a host, which would be me, will monitor the online meeting. When we get to the agenda item where you wish to comment, please use the raise your hand feature to indicate that you'd like to speak, and I can recognize you and let you in. And as usual, comments are limited to 3 minutes, so please keep them to 3 minutes or less. And what we'll try and do, if there's multiple comments, we'll try and hear all those comments at once and then try and answer those questions after we get all the comments, if everybody's okay with that. So we'll try and do that. So our first action item is public hearing, consideration of a proposed resolution approving the program year 2019 Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, also known as the CAPER, for receipt of Community Development Block Grant funds. Mike DeSimone, are you with us?
Yep, we workshopped this last time. In a nutshell, this is just our annual action plan. We received $471,000 of CDE funds last year, well, program year 2019, and we went through how we've spent that over the past year. Pretty straightforward. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Does anyone have any questions for Mike before we open it up for the public?
No, you did such a fabulous job last week or 2 weeks ago.
Chester? Turn up.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out all of our attendees as well too. So at this point, since we don't have any discussion or any other questions for Mike, we'll open that up to the public. If anyone would like to comment on resolution 21-05, this is your opportunity. We'll give you a little bit of time just in case. All right, I'm not seeing any public comment. We didn't receive any emails on this one. So let's bring it back to the council for action.
I would move adoption of this. I think they've done a great job and I'm proud of what we have accomplished. So that's a motion.
Is there
I'll
a second?
I'll
All right.
second.
All right, second by Amy. All right. Is there any further discussion for the council? Not seeing any. All those in favor of resolution 21-05, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, resolution 21-5 passes or is approved. What's the correct terminology there, Mayor?
Is approved.
It's approved. Okay, excellent. Okay, let's move on to resolution 21-09. This is a public hearing for consideration of a proposed resolution amending the CDBG program year 2019 annual action plan. Mike, I think you're in charge of this one again, please.
So I'll go through a quick slideshow on it, but just to set that up, normally we workshop the CDBG stuff with the council ahead of time. This is the part of the COVID money. And so it's got an accelerated process and I'll kind of go through that. So I'm going to share my screen with you real fast. I think you got everything. You got the slides I sent out and the memo and the recommendations from staff.
Mhm.
We did.
Okay. Can you see that one?
Yep.
Okay. Hang on, I'm having technical difficulties. Oh, well. Okay, so this is our second round of COVID money, and we were notified last year, oops, let's see here, hang on a sec. So last year, the CARES Act was passed and we received one round of money or funding in early 2020. And then we got the second round later at the end of 2020. And really the purpose is to prevent, prepare for, respond to the coronavirus pandemic. What this act has done procedurally is it modifies our traditional CDBG processes. It allows for expedited review and approval. And then the purpose or the goal is to respond quickly to immediate needs. So round one funding was for $299,912. Round two is $207,849. So procedurally, we have to amend our 2019 annual action plan. And when we do the CDBG, we actually have a public service funding cap, but in this case, it doesn't apply. When we did the first round of funding, if y'all remember back when the pandemic started, there's a lot of unknowns about what COVID really was. The healthcare impacts at the time, at least in Cache Valley and Logan, weren't as significant as they were elsewhere. So we had low infection rates, fairly stable. The biggest impact that we found where people were losing jobs, businesses were closing, or at least temporarily shutting down, job reductions, mental health impacts, and there was impacts to nonprofits. So that round of funding went to the food pantry, CAPSA, Bear River Health, Sunshine Terrace, Family Place. We tried to do a business and a nonprofit and a low mod income assistance program. We funded some nonprofit assistance, but the business assistance program didn't get off the ground. And then we did very minimal with our low mod income resident program. So that money is rolled back into our nonprofit assistance program. So we've helped out like Little Lambs, Common Ground, community nursing. So now round two, like I said, we got it last year, kind of in October, September timeframe. We put out an application for it at that time, but what we decided to do was wait to see what the impacts were going to be, knowing the vaccine was coming up. So now, looking at the healthcare impacts, we know the infection rate has gone up, but it's stabilized. It's starting to come back down. There still are some economic impacts, but not as significant. The mental health impacts are still there. So really what we're looking at is vaccine distribution, hopefully an end to this. And these are the eligible activities in round two, same as what we did in round one. And again, $207,000. And our funding recommendation this time is to push that full amount to the fire department and Bear River Health Department to run community vaccine clinics through our fire stations. So the idea is to utilize existing facilities, fund our fire department staff to administer vaccines. And so this would be above and beyond their normal shift work. So it would be either temporary part-time or fire department personnel in overtime. And then also look at establishing a mobile vaccination unit that can go out to folks that are homebound. And the idea is to gear up in anticipation of an increase in vaccine availability. We also want to designate receiver activities, so Little Lambs, the food pantry, CAPSA, and other nonprofit assistance, just in case we don't fully fund or the funds aren't utilized through the vaccination program. So we want to hold a public hearing tonight. We want you guys to have, if you have other ideas for assistance funding, if there's nobody else that has any ideas, we've done public notification on this, but we think the best position for this funding is to go to vaccinations. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mike,
Yes.
in the process of doing the vaccination clinics, I noticed that CRIC is not one of the nonprofits that's on the list. But I know that if our refugee community may be less able to access vaccinations than other people, will there be a way for the fire department to sort of help facilitate that as well?
Yeah, I would think so. I think we could reach out to them directly and get them in the queue along with everybody else who's in, within the age groups and the health conditions and those things like that. But yeah, we can get the word out to CRIC to disseminate to their group.
I think that would be a really good idea, actually.
Okay.
So would this be scheduled through Bear River Health, and then they would say, okay, please go to this location to get your vaccine, or would that be part of the scheduling as well too?
Yeah, so the health district will still provide the administrative oversight and the scheduling, and the fire department will provide the manpower to actually do the vaccination work. So I think our guys are better suited for the operational side of vaccines, and the health district is better suited for the administrative side of it.
Mike, for administrative, I'm assuming the tracking of who is getting vaccinated and to make sure they're not getting it either too frequently or too far apart. That's all under the health department.
That's correct. Yes.
Jeannie and I were talking about this earlier. Is it possible that they could use some of their equipment and do some mobile sites to go into neighborhoods, places where people might not be able to get out?
Yeah, that's the goal, is to set up a mobile unit that can service that clientele that is homebound.
Chief Hennig, I see you're on. Is this something that the firefighters are excited about doing?
They are, and like Mike said, we've already done a MOU with the Bear River Health Department. We actually already did a training week with them. We helped administer vaccines 2 weeks ago when they had the Pfizer and the Moderna both hit their second doses in the same week. So we had staff there helping them administer those, and so we had a really good turnout with our people. They were excited to be able to help, and so, like he said, to echo what Mike already said, we believe that fire sites and stations will be a good access point for the community, as well as we plan on having a mobile, having a mobile administration, so we can go out into some of the homebound in different areas and be able to administer some of those as needed.
That's great.
I encourage you then to connect with the Area Agency on Aging in Bragg to identify those seniors that they're working with that are homebound. If you're looking for ways to reach out to them, that would be a good resource.
Okay, we got a plan in place. We're just waiting for the funding to come available, and then we'll get to go to work.
Excellent. Any other questions for Mike or for Chief Hennig?
I think it's a good plan and a good approach, because the sooner we can get shots in arms, that'll hopefully then in turn help the businesses and help all of healthcare institutions to manage the thing. So prevention is a great use of these funds. So I endorse this proposal.
Great. It is a public meeting, so unless there's any other questions, we'll open it up for public comment. Anyone else? All right. So for resolution 21-09, we'll open up our public hearing. If there's anyone attending that would like to make a comment, now is your opportunity. All right. Again, reminder, 3 minutes per comment, and please state your name and where you live when it's your turn. All right, let's see. Dr. Yost, are you available? I'm trying to let you in. Let's see. All right. Jeff, I might need your assistance. Oh, there we go. It's being slow, so let's try this. All right. Yeah, for some reason, it's not letting me allow people into the meeting. Jeff, I might need your assistance. There we go. Dr. Yost, are you with us?
I'm with you.
There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we've got you.
Good. I thought maybe I did something wrong.
No, it was me on my end. For some reason, it's not letting me let you in. So
I was wondering if it's possible to do some of these inoculations, some of these vaccines at maybe some of the bigger shopping centers like the Walmarts or or Smith's or someplace like that where people congregate anyway, and see if there are people who are coming in and not having had their shots yet, but just kind of lax about doing it. Or maybe they aren't convinced that it's going to make a difference or it's going to actually be safe.
All right.
Anyway,
Thanks.
that's my question.
Very good. Thank you for your comment, Dr. Yost. We were going to see if there's anyone else that comments, and then we should be able to answer that. Mike or Chief Hanig, if you wanted to think about that. I don't see any other public comments. So if there are no other public comments, we'll answer that question and then bring it back to the council. So Mike, are you on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea, but what really our approach is to utilize our existing facilities where our staff is going to be staged out of and use those areas where folks can come in and do it there. That'd be the simplest, most efficient way for us to administer vaccines. So, I mean, it's a good point. But for now, the approach is to use our existing facilities.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll bring it back to the council. Any other comments or questions, council, before we vote? I'm open for a motion.
I would move acceptance of resolution 21-09.
I would second that.
All right, our resolution has been moved and seconded. If there's any other comments, now's the time.
This is just a simple question. I think
Yes, Tom.
we're around 4% vaccinated at this point. What does the chief have any idea as to how far this would go toward full vaccination of our county?
That's a really good question that I don't really have the answer to at this point. I know our limitations are going to be about the availability of the vaccine. I think that's probably going to be our biggest constraint. So we're hoping that we'll continue to administer those as long as we have them available, for as long as that money will take us, as far as it will take us. So we're hoping it'll take us through several months. We're anticipating that it will take several months or throughout the summer to be able to get to that point. So we'll do our best to administer all that's available to us as fast as we can.
Thank you.
Very good. All right, all those in favor of resolution 21-09, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next action item is ordinance 21-02, code amendment, consideration of a proposed ordinance amending chapter 17.14 public zone uses and 17.62 definitions. Russ Holly, are you with us, Russ?
Thank you, Chairman Anderson. I am.
Thank you.
I have included some additional data that the council requested last meeting when we workshopped this item. And it was included in the packet. I researched about a dozen other cities similar in size to Logan. 5 of those cities don't allow RV parks within the city limits. Most are the ones that do allow it. Most are in a commercial zone or a mobile home type of zoning district. St. George was unique in the fact that they require a PUD for their RV parks, so they create a planned unit development zoning district. As far as length of stay is concerned, the majority that do permit RV parks are in that 30-day range, short term. Brigham City allows 180 days. St. George doesn't have a max it would be approved through that PUD process. And then Provo City allows long-term as well. I included some of the definitions and additional information. As you know, last time the applicant actually wanted to withdraw this application, but he had done it too late and it was already on the agenda. It has been posted as a public hearing. So I think we do need to honor that notice and make sure that we at least hold a public hearing. After that, it's the council's purview on how they want to proceed. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions at this point.
Could you quickly review again what the planning commission's viewpoints were on this?
Yes. So the original application to the planning commission was 90-day increments to change the code from the current 30-day maximum to increments of 90. And the original application just said you could do subsequent 90 days on and on and on and just, bounce around. The planning commission changed that and they said, we would recommend that it's a 90-day max period and that it's not subsequent stays. And so that's what the planning commission changed and sent forward to the council for approval. And they voted 7-0 for that once they amended that original application.
What was the staff's recommendation to begin with?
Well, again, when we received it, it was that incremental 90 days, which could be an indefinite stay. Staff's concerns are centered around long-term permanent residents. That's the complaints that we receive. They're typically refuse or junk collection, things of that nature, which is associated with permanent long-term residential use. We're also concerned about permanent residents in an RV that's not built for permanent housing. Our winters are cold, they're wet. These RVs just structurally aren't built to be lived in year round 24/7. So that was staff's concerns. One of the issues that was brought up, which is I think a good point to consider, is we have vacationers that stay longer than 30 days. So we have the snowbird groups that will come up, for 3 months, and they're still vacationers. They're contributing to the tourism. They're not here permanently, and so that was a good point that was brought up in the planning commission meeting, is that some vacationers are a little bit longer than 30 days. So that was staff's stance or position.
Russ, I have a question, and I'm good with the 90 days. I think that's a good number because it's about the summertime and so forth. But was there some writing someplace about that from after 90 days, you can pick up your unit and go to another pad and set down again? Or is that not being allowed under this current? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, and that was the original application, was
Right.
you could just pick up and move to the next slot and so on and so on. But the planning commission changed that recommendation to what you see on the ordinance now, which simply says 90 days max. And they actually, the current code has 2 definitions, RV park short-term, RV park long-term, because about a decade ago, we allowed long-term, and that never got removed from the definition section of the code. But they eliminated the long-term definition. So we only have one RV park definition, and it says a period not to exceed 90 days. So that was the planning commission amendment.
That's good and that's clear. That's good.
Right. there's no other questions, we'll open it up for the public hearing. Again, a reminder for those of you that would like to participate, try and keep your comments to 3 minutes. And if we have more than one comment, we'll try and get all those comments before we move on. So if you'd like to make a comment and you're attending via Zoom, now's your opportunity for the public. Okay, I don't see anyone jumping right in, so let's bring it back to the council for discussion.
So I have a
Can I
question
say-
before we,
Okay.
so when we're looking at the language, when it says parcel, I'm presuming that that's in there because that refers to the entire RV park versus just a spot in the park. I just want to make sure it's like super clear that it's 90 days and you're out of the development, not like moving around. Because I think, Tom's question was a valid one. It was talked about that. Is that clear enough to people that
Yeah, so
terminology,
an
parcel?
RV park is one parcel of land.
Okay,
And they rent the little slots, but they're not subdivided slots. So yes, you would have to leave the park after 90 days.
okay.
Okay, I'm going to be the outlier here. Is my microphone on? Yeah.
Yep.
I feel like we entered into this conversation because we had a proponent that felt that without some broadening of our initial definition of RV park, he couldn't make money. And then the discussion was broadened from there to, well, people like to stay longer than that. And so now the proponent has wanted to withdraw the motion entirely because they're no longer going to do what they intended to do. So is it a good idea for us to change it at this point in time? Is it going to cause ripple effects in other ways that we don't yet understand because we don't have anything concrete to match it to? And would we be better off just leaving it the way it is for now and bringing it up again should the need arise?
So I kind of am with you, Jeannie, because we do have other other opportunities for short-term spots. 7 days seems really short though, which is what the original ordinance was.
I thought it was 30.
The one
Russ?
the amendment that we have amends it from 7 to 90 in the PDF we got.
But someplace else it said 30.
I think it was 30.
Yeah,
I thought it was
that's
30.
that's actually a typo. It should be 30. And it references it in another area of code. So 30 would be the number today.
Okay, what page am I on here? On page 2 of the packet, in the packet we were given where it says RV park and then short term is eliminated, that should say for a period not to exceed 30 days. That's what the language originally had, not the 7.
What happened was that in one part of the code, it said 7, and in another part of the code, it said 30.
Okay.
So they felt that the one that said 7 was a typo and it had to be 30 because it did say that elsewhere.
Okay, so either way, something needs to change in this, correct?
So my suggestion would be, well, they can fix that section of code without coming to us. Correct, Russ?
No, any code change requires council, but that's typically done when Mike does cleanup work
Okay.
on the code. So yeah.
Well, then my suggestion would be we go with the 30 days that is elsewhere in the code.
So I would like to make a motion then for approval of ordinance 21-02 amended to reflect a 30-day period.
And I will second that.
Let me throw
It's been moved and seconded. Open for discussion, Tom.
it's open for discussion. I like the 90 days. I thought it was a good thing. And if we're cleaning it up, why don't we get it to something that we felt more comfortable with? I'm certainly more comfortable with 90 days because of our summer citizens coming here.
Yeah.
Than 30 days. And if it's a good thing, then we can do it. And if
Yeah.
it's not, we can always change it again to something else.
But we've never had anybody complain. Ever.
They're just timid.
And I don't believe the summer citizens come in RVs. I believe they come and stay in apartments on campus.
I have quite a few neighbors that go down to southern Utah and Las Vegas and so forth, and they take their RVs and they go into a park like this and they stay for the 3 months. And so I can understand that 3-month window. I mean, they get out of cold Cache Valley for 3 months, and some people get out of hot Mojave Desert for 3 months. And it's a good thing. I don't think there's a virtue in cleaning it up, but there's also a virtue in getting it to a point where we think it ought to be.
Well, Tom, I will agree to disagree.
I kind of like the 90 days too, Tom. I think that just makes sense to me for an RV. If I have to move it, I don't want to have to move it in 30 days. I want to stick around for a little bit. So, and I don't do that, but I'm just trying to think of how much work it is to move and set up and hook up and, so I'm good with the 90 days. Craig, you were going to participate and say something. We don't need a motion to change this if it's already at 30 days, right?
Well, right now the section B is at 7, and we need to do that cleanup language.
So it is 7.
Yeah, which was my amendment to make that the 30 days.
Okay.
Or my amendment to the motion. I guess I think that my fear is by doing it 90 days, you're right. In the summer, we have summer citizens, but that 90 days is year round. And when Russ just talked about the fact that RVs are not meant to be permanent living quarters, my concern is that we're just going to see individuals living in one for 90 days in the winter, leaving for a day and coming right back a day later, because the code would allow that, is my understanding from our discussion 2 weeks ago. So that's why I'm more comfortable with the 30-day. I think it fits what our usage has been, and it precludes our short-term RV parks from inadvertently turning into long-term places for individuals to live in a place that, while it's meant for vacation habitation, is not meant for permanent habitation.
But by that same logic, a person could leave after 29 and a half days and come back and stay for another 30 days.
Yes, they could. But it eliminates that clutter, and it's not their spot. They're not.
Yeah, I think I'm still comfortable with the 90 and would push for that. So,
yeah. Well, can we designate that for a certain time period if you're concerned about the winter time, and do from, May until, September would be like summertime hours, and we'd have winter time be a little bit different, or we want it just to be straight across the board the same for the whole time?
Sort of like winter parking.
Yeah. Would be like winter parking.
I don't know. I just really feel like if someone wants to come back with some reason that it's a good idea to have it be 90 days, other than it's financially more viable that way, I would be willing to go with it. But I think 30 is adequate for a wheels up type RV park. Ernesto, you're very quiet.
We need to compromise and go with 60.
That's a possibility. I mean, the motion's been made and seconded, so we've got that in front of us for 30. Whether we want to keep that and vote on it, take it back, change it. I think 90s. I was good with 90, but if we don't have a reason to change it.
I just don't see a reason at this point in time to change it at all.
I would tend to agree with Jeannie's comment that it wasn't a problem. And then a proponent had a vision which prompted the review. So we're we're changing something that wasn't problematic. I mean, not that that's the only reason we ever do ordinances is to fix a problem, but
Yeah.
I don't know. As I said, I'm comfortable with the 30 days, so.
We have had two different parks approach us now too. So not just the one, but they didn't make it through planning commission. So
Yeah,
Is
How
it,
many parks
po-
do we have?
is it possible we would have more summer citizens come here if they knew they could bring their fifth wheel up here? Or
Tom, that is a what if question that I don't know the answer to.
Russ, you were motioning we had two. Didn't we have two proponents?
We have 2 total parks, and the applicant that was continued at the planning commission is a prospective new owner of one of those 2 parks, the Riverside. So we have the Travel Land and Riverside are the 2 current RV parks in Logan.
and I'll be honest, the communication on that second site is partly why I want to stick with 30 days, because the communication on that seems like that could potentially be a problem.
Then what about the proposed park that was going to be out by Renegade Sports? Isn't
That's
that one?
gone away.
That's off the table.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And that's the proponent that wanted to withdraw the motion to begin with.
Okay.
For that park.
There's so many plans. I can't keep them straight. So,
I don't blame
And
you.
correct me if I'm wrong, some of these parks have grandfathered spaces that go beyond the current ordinance limits.
Only the one, Russ, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but only the one that is still in discussion has a few that are grandfathered in, if it were sold to a new owner. So you can't take away the use once it's been granted, but you can't expand the use if the zoning has changed.
Correct.
any other discussion? We might have a little disagreement on this one, so let's go by roll call. So, Tom, your vote?
Well, I'd go for nay, and I don't want to lose any friends over this.
You will.
You're assuming that we're friends, Tom.
No, that's all right. Jeannie?
Listening to too much of Washington, I guess, right now.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Ernesto
Aye.
and Amy.
Aye.
I'm with Tom, nay. So it carries 3-2, and you're still all my friends. Okay, motion for ordinance 21-02 passes. So, all right.
As amended.
With the amendment, yeah, with the amendment. So with the amendment. So did you catch that, Craig, on what the amendment was?
If
Yeah,
this is
I
the
caught that.
greatest fireworks we
Okay.
ever have in our council meetings, then I think we're doing well.
Yeah.
Just wait, there's more to come.
Yeah. I completely understand your point for 30 days. I understand Tom's perspective on 90 days. Good discussion. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. All right. Next public hearing, ordinance 21-03. Consideration of a proposed ordinance amending properties in the Ellis neighborhood at 286 South 100 West from mixed residential low and commercial to mixed use. Russ, you're up again.
Yeah, so this is called the Renewal Rezone Project. It's about 1.7 acres at the intersection of First West and Third South. There's currently 5 older homes and 3 commercial properties that comprise the project area. The applicant is requesting mixed use. Currently, the zoning is MR12 and commercial. It's a split zone. The applicant's intention is to build a vertical mixed use building with residential apartments on the upper floors and commercial on the ground floor. He's mentioned a bistro, some other kind of local serving types of commercial uses, as well as he wants to dedicate quite a bit of space to, a gym and some electric bike parking, electric charging, and those Amazon hub stations where you pick up your packages. They did not propose design review at this point. Their application included some generic images, but it is their intention, if the rezone is approved, that they would go to the Planning Commission for a design review permit for a mixed use building. The only new thing about this project is just today, we got an email from the business owner of Beehive Grill, which is located on this block. He expressed concerns and opposition. He's worried about traffic and parking. And he's worried that Logan's going to turn into Southern California and introduce some of those problems down there. Any questions about renewal at this point?
I have one, Russ. What's the big difference between mixed use and commercial of what it's really zoned already?
Yeah.
Yeah, and along, if I can add my question to that, so more specifically to like differences in setbacks, differences in height, things
Yeah.
like that, from the mixed use to both the MR12 and the commercial.
And density.
Yep. So your packet shows all that, but let me go over that really quick because there are some differences. From a use standpoint, it's pretty similar. I mean, you can have offices and restaurants and retail. So use-wise, it's pretty similar. The main difference is going to be in your form and your height and your density.
Right.
Mixed use is 30 units per acre, so is commercial, but mixed use allows density bonuses. So you can bump up to 40 with a bonus. Mixed use allows a 58-foot tall building. Let's see. Yeah, 58. And commercial, I think, is 35. And then if you go back, you can go up to like 45. So it's a little bit taller than mixed use, or excuse me, taller than commercial. And then the other main difference with mixed use is it's a very urban zoning district, which requires the building right out on the street. There's a maximum setback. So you can't push the building towards the back of the lot. It has to be up on the street or within 10 feet of the street. And then it requires a wider building too. It's a more urban, dense type of development pattern, and it's deliberate because the goal is to have, dense developments where you can live, work, and play and walk rather than drive.
What's our
So
commercial setback?
commercial setbacks?
What's the commercial setback?
Commercial setback starts at 10, and you can go back as far as you want. And the farther you go back, the higher you can go a little bit too. The Adams office building on South Main went a little bit higher because it was set back farther.
And that was commercial.
That was commercial, correct. So those are the main differences.
Yeah, Ross, with respect to housing, there is a big difference. Right?
Well, what do you mean by respect to housing?
Well, if you do housing and commercial, there has to be commercial on the bottom and housing above. But in a mixed use environment, you only have to have a percentage of your structure be commercial. And it's a really pretty small percentage, and the rest can be housing.
Well, you're correct, but it's not a percentage of the structure, it's a percentage of the land or the project site. So you can have, for instance, this parcel is 1.7. and you are required 1,500 square feet of commercial for a mixed use building. So you can have a very small amount of commercial in a mixed use project, and then you could have standalone residential. We saw that on 6th West with the Homestead project, where they had some commercial in one building, but then they had, you know, a dozen other buildings that were residential. Commercial zoning requires the ground floor to be 100% commercial. So
For the
square
entire,
footage,
for the entire first floor, or just the first floor that faces the street?
the entire first floor of any building in a commercial
Okay.
zone needs to be commercial use. The upper floors can be residential. So yeah, you have to do vertical mixed use in commercial zones, and you don't necessarily have to do it in mixed use. You can, and you can get bonuses and incentives by doing that. But the minimum requirement for this project site would be 1,500 square feet of commercial.
Russ, can I ask a question based on the proposal that was, you know, the discussion that the proponent had in Planning Commission? Is the Amazon drop spot considered commercial? Is the bike repair area considered commercial? Is the gym considered commercial in this sort of structure?
If it's open to the public, then the answer to that is yes for all of the above. If it's a gym that is only utilized and open to apartment tenants, then the answer is no, because it's not really a commercial use. It's just an amenity for that residential project.
Okay. And then can you go over MR12 as well?
I don't have that right in front of me, but it's a medium density residential zone. It only allows 12 units per acre. It's 35 feet tall, so you know, maybe 3 stories. And then commercial is pretty much prohibited unless there's some kind of home office or very small daycare type of things that are allowed in the MR12 zone. It's a residential zone.
And I think those have 8-foot setbacks, if I read the code properly today in MR12.
No, they're a bigger setback. I think they're 10 to 15. 8 foot's probably the side.
Oh, the side yard. Okay, yeah,
And
you're right. I'm
the other
looking at my
one-
notes. You're right, it's side yard.
The other one unique aspect about this particular site is kitty corner is single family residential. And whenever you have single family kitty corner adjacent, then you have to set your things back, or you have some height transition requirements. So you can't build, 58 feet straight up right across the street from houses. You have to step back and transition your height.
Even that's for mixed use as well as for MR12.
Yeah, any
At that.
higher intensity zone next to a single family zone.
Well, MR12 though has the same height requirements as a single family.
Right, so it's not applicable for MR12,
Right,
but
but
anything
for
taller than-
mixed use, it would be. So
Russ,
they can't go right to the corner, like
They can't go
sidewalk
50
to sidewalk because of the single family across the street.
So they can go right to the corner, but they can only go up 3 stories max, and then they have to step back, and then they could go up to 5 stories.
Okay.
Hey, Russ, the letter that we received, I think it's Jeff Matthews, and I read it and I did write back to him, but I can't study it fast. I didn't get it in time. Excuse me, I didn't open it in time to really study it. But the question many of the questions he had related to parking. Can you contrast the two or compare the two zones, commercial and mixed use with regard to the parking?
Yeah, they're actually similar. So when you have a studio unit, the parking requirement is 1.5 stalls per unit. And then when you have a 2-bedroom or larger residential unit, the parking requirement is 2 parking stalls per unit. And then
This is for which
that's
zone?
for both mixed use and commercial.
Okay, all right.
And then each commercial use is based on that particular use. A restaurant has a high parking requirement. An office has a little bit lower. So I can tell you those if you want, but it's based on each individual use, and when we review those at a business license stage.
So basically, if we go just commercial, they could still build what they're thinking. They'd have to just reconfigure the bottom floor a little bit differently, correct? With the tentative proposal that they sent in.
And the FLUP has this all as commercial, correct? Would be the natural rezone if we followed our FLUP, this whole parcel would be commercial.
Yes.
Yes, the FLUP is commercial. And to answer Chairman Anderson's question, not quite. So they can't build as high, and they are not eligible for the density bonuses. But everything else you said is right.
Okay. Thank you.
So one of the things that Jeff Matthews brought up that I thought was really critically important is the impact of traffic with a high intensity residential use on those particular streets. Do we ever do traffic impact studies or anything like that prior to agreeing to rezone something? Because it seems to me that especially Third South is very narrow. He's planning, he talked about doing live work facing Third South, which, would potentially add to parking issues. And, I just think that we should seriously consider all of those ramifications before we make this kind of a high density change. But I'm willing to listen to the public. And
Russ, how many units under the proposed mixed use? I haven't done the calculation. How many units could he get on this parcel?
So the bonus can get you up to 40 units per acre. And let's see, I thought I did the math, but I don't, 1.73 times 40. Let me grab
69.
Oh,
69.
And to answer Chairman Simmons'
I'm not a
question.
chairman. Mark's the only chairman.
Vice Chairwoman.
Let me back up. I apologize.
It'll be fine.
I have not seen a traffic impact study associated with a rezone request. I have with a specific project. Traffic engineers typically need a unit count. They typically need, a bedroom count to conduct those TIS studies.
But it's really difficult for us to say, okay, you can put 76 units on this corner. And oh, by the way, maybe you'll have enough parking. And oh, by the way, you're going to have commercial, and where are they going to go? And then all of a sudden we find out the roads won't accommodate it. That seems a little backwards.
But Jeannie, our future transportation master program is based on our FLUP. So
Right.
when
And so but your FLUP doesn't have that density in that area.
no, the FLUP has the commercial zone with its equivalent density of 30 units to the acre. So when they did the calculations and looking at future designs for Third South or Main or any of those other roadways, they took into account what the FLUP had planned.
But this is a higher intensity use than the FLUP.
Yeah, mixed use allows for you to increase your density with the density bonus. That's correct.
Okay.
It's about 16 units difference.
Correct.
Hey, Mark, I have to step away and find the charger for my laptop, so I will be back in a hot minute. Hold on.
Okay, we
My
will not
battery-
vote without you.
My battery's running out and I don't have the plug.
Okay,
So that's 32 cars.
yeah, could be,
Jeannie,
could be.
you and I talked about it briefly. I didn't have the advantage of having read the letter. I've read it now. There are a number of things to consider on this. Would it make some sense to continue this and not act one way or the other until we get into a little more discussion? I think there's a lot of loose ends.
Well, we need to have a public hearing, so
Yeah.
we can talk about that. I mean, that's
So
absolutely
this
an
is just a
idea.
workshop.
Yeah. Do you want to hear from the public? Russ, what were you going to say?
No,
Are you
I
gonna
didn't.
say something? Oh, okay. All right. I thought I saw you make a motion. So, all right. Are you okay if we open it up for public hearing so we can hear what our community has to say?
Yeah, are we going to act? Is this an action item?
This is an action item, but we're going to hear from the public first, Tom.
You know, okay.
All right. Just want to be clear.
Right, that's what I said about the continuation instead of
Yeah.
act.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
acting, it is a continuation. I mean, a continuation is a form of an act, but we still have to have the public hearing.
They're going to public hearing. So, okay, we are going to open this up for the public. And let me see if I can get this to work. There we go. We've got a couple people who would like to participate. Reminder, if you're going to comment, you have 3 minutes to comment, and we're going to try and take all the comments before we try and answer all the questions. So let's see, we've got Mr. Allen. You are welcome to comment.
Thank you. This is Kevin Allen. I'm one of the proponents of this project. And we appreciate the concern about parking and traffic on this. I think we have designed a project that takes those concerns into consideration. That's why we're emphasizing electric charging stations, electric bike use that we would provide as part of to the people that live there. But I think the parking consideration is not accurate. We have spent the past a couple months monitoring the parking situation. Our offices are down here in this building, and so we're very familiar with the parking concerns. And in our monitoring of the parking, that we have the pictures to prove it, there's been no less than 40 open parking spaces down here. The concern that especially Beehive Grill has is everyone wants to park and walk 15 feet to the front door. There's lots of open parking down on First West across from the high school, a part of which Logan City owns some of that parking. And that parking is, like we said, most often open. People just don't want to drive down there and use it and walk an extra 100 yards to go eat dinner. I would point out that people have no problem parking 200 yards away from Walmart to go to Walmart, but for some reason they feel like they have to have a right to park right across the front door of Beehive Grill. And it can be a concern, but I think the parking situation can be figured out. And in addition to that, whatever project we bring to you folks after or before, or depending on what the rezone is, it's going to be able to work through those parking issues according to the code that you've set. And we would do that. We would work into the code. I don't think we have an obligation to provide parking for the property that we own to another business. And that's essentially what the business owner is asking us to do, is to provide that parking for them. And we would work through with the city and the city staff and you folks to provide a project that was very workable. We want to fill the project. We don't want to have our tenants have problems. And so we would put something together that fits the code and that is workable for the people that would be living there. We don't think that the increased density is that egregious or that difficult to work through. There's plenty of units that are close, there are plenty of projects that are close by within blocks of that area that have much higher density and have similar parking and traffic issues. First West is a major corridor road. It will go all the way through past the new Gateway building. You folks know as well as anybody, you're building a bridge there. That's going to be a major road, and we think that's a perfect place to put people as they come out with their car. But we're not emphasizing cars. I mean, that's the whole point of mixed use, is to emphasize and not have to use cars as much. That's why there's, we'll point out when the time comes that there's a Cache Valley Transit spot right across the street that's very effective and very useful for people. There's walking places where people don't need to walk. There's 25 different food establishments, 3 parks, 2 gyms, multiple healthcare providers, 3 theaters, numerous places of employment, and grocery stores all within 3 blocks of this place. And I think that fits into the general plan. And so we would ask you to consider that we have thought through that. And even with all of those considerations, there's plenty of parking. People just don't want to walk very far.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Allen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. All right, next up, Dr. Yost. Try. I'm trying to,
Okay.
there we go. There we go.
Here I am. Anyway, I live right near 3rd South. And quite often, maybe even once a week, we end up going on 3rd South to the west for different things. Some of it is for just visiting friends. But I noticed that when we go there, when we go on that route on Fridays and Saturdays, if there's any kind of sporting event over by the high school or in the rec center, the traffic gets really difficult going north and south on First West and then trying to get across east and west, because of it does not have a traffic signal there. It just has stop signs. And I'm concerned that that kind of traffic, extra traffic and extra parking would make it more difficult for people who are trying to get to those events or trying to get past those events like we have had to do. And even if it's just to go to the bakery that's further down, there is significant traffic there already. And not as much as we have on First East, obviously, but significant enough to be an impediment for safer travel. That's my comment.
All right, great, thank you. All right, is there anyone else? I think we've had ample time for you to raise your hand if you wanted to. I don't see any others. We'll bring that back to council for some more discussion or action, whichever you'd like to do.
I have one more question. I know that due to traffic increases, we put a light at 3rd South and First East. Is there any projected signaling for this intersection down the road that we're aware of? There is the light at First South, but with the Wonder Bread development changing, and now this, and the through traffic on First East to the south. Anyone have any idea what those plans are for signaling?
Also, I'm here.
We're currently working on an update to the transportation master plan. I don't believe that was on the previous plan, but again, given the growth, it may be something that we're looking at. But again, the update has not been completed yet.
Okay, all right. It would be helpful, I think, to know that that's going to be part of it, because we do have those 2 other developments just within 2 blocks of this location now. I think Dr. Yost's comment about, I myself also try to cross First West sometimes at 3rd South, and it can take a while with the one-way or whatever 2-way stop there. I could see that becoming a traffic issue.
And typically the first step before you put an intersection is, again, you do the count, and if it's warranted, again, if it has a certain volume. So maybe we, should take a look at that.
I think the Woodruff plan that we're going to look at next has a roundabout scheduled for in their 10-year plan. I'm looking at it right now, so that's a possibility.
As a traffic calming thing.
Yeah.
So is this in Woodruff or Ellis?
Well, it's
This
in the
is
Woodruff
Ellis.
plan, but it says it's in the Ellis neighborhood, so
Okay.
Annex Ellis.
yeah.
I quite like the concept, although I haven't seen any design, but I like the general concept. We're trying to bring people to the walkable area of our downtown. Yet there are some questions, and so I would at least throw out the idea to take 2 additional weeks or so and think about some of these other things. Otherwise, I'd be supportive of this.
I'm with you, Tom. I think in general, I'm supportive of the rezone. If people need more time to address questions, though, I would be amenable to postponing it until our meeting in March.
I guess my only concern is not parking. My concern is traffic. And I worry about the traffic impacts of additional cars because of the housing, the amount of housing.
On the other hand, though, Jeannie, housing, the timing of that is probably going to be work commute related, whereas if it was all commercial, you would have traffic scattered throughout the day. So
Yeah.
it's still going to have traffic impact no matter what the project is. I guess it would just depend, as Mayor Dane suggested, if you're doing a traffic study, what and when and why traffic is a problem. I don't know.
Yeah, that was gonna be my comment too. And if it's straight up commercial, we've got some commercial businesses that go in there. There's gonna be more traffic than residential. But that's just from my perspective. Ernesto, anything you'd like to comment? You're muted. Yeah.
I think I agree with both Tom and Jeannie. I'd like to maybe think more about it and decide in the next meeting.
Russ, if we continue, will that be a impediment to our project? Will that be a hardship?
I could talk to the applicant and see. I know they're anxious, but as long as you continue at date specific, it's fine with me.
It would be, my proposal would be to the next meeting. So that's what, 2 weeks.
But I do think, I agree with you, Tom, but I would also think that it would be appropriate for us to say what things we would like answers to in that 2-week time period.
Sure.
As I recall, when we did we were looking at a rezone a couple of years ago on 10th West in that area. We continued it so that we could look at things like traffic accidents and things like that. So I don't know if it's feasible in a 2-week period to do a traffic count for a period of time. I've never done it. I have no idea how long traffic counts are supposed to go for, how long it takes to get them set up on a road. I don't know if Paul's available to answer that question. I mean, if that's like a 2-month process, or if that's something that you could look at statistics on in 2 weeks, I don't know the answer to that.
Are you looking just for traffic counts? Is that what you're looking for?
I would like, I guess I would like current counts and accident rates perhaps, or something like that in that general neighborhood.
Okay. If we have the count, the accident data is obviously available, so that's not a time issue. If we have the counts, we can get those quickly. Otherwise, it's more going to be dependent on weather for getting our traffic counters out there, because the plows and counters don't mix together very well.
Gotcha.
But it could take the 2 weeks or more to get the data and get analyzed for you. If you're just looking for traffic counts, we may have some. I'd have to look at our previous traffic counts and get it to you.
And Jeannie, are you looking like traffic counts in that section of Main Street, on 3rd South, on 1st
Well,
North?
I'm thinking that the majority of the impact, because of the, I would assume if you're going to build a building, you're going to build it on 1st West and 3rd South. So your parking is going to be somewhere exiting onto 3rd South. I would assume. I don't really know, but because because the property goes half of the block. I'm doing this with my hands. I need to be in person for that. But because it does go 50% of the block east on 3rd South. so my assumption would be that the parking lot would be somewhere interior to that, since the design standards are that you have to build to the street. And it's a corner, so you'd have to build to the street on both sides, because it would be basically two fronts. And so I would think that most of the traffic impact would be leaving and going into Third South, leaving from and going into Third South, around that intersection of First West. So that would be my main concern, because Main Street's already signalized, and it functions the way it functions, and it's a state road anyway, so it would take us a lot longer to analyze that.
Yeah.
So
I think whether this goes mixed use or whether it goes commercial, it's going to increase traffic either way. And proponent has purchased all that property that's MR12, so I think it's got to go either commercial or mixed use. And I'm good to vote on it tonight. But if you all want to do something different, I'm open for a motion.
I'd like to make one more comment is that we're talking about the traffic and growth and so forth, but we are growing. And whether we grow, Logan, or we're still growing because Nibley's growing and Providence is growing and so forth. And our county is growing even more rapidly than it was a year ago because of crazy things that are happening in West Coast cities and so forth. And so we are growing, and we will be growing in Logan. And so I don't think we say, well, we don't want to do something or this project. It's not that big of a project, actually, because of this, because there's going to be other projects. The thing we need to do is to mitigate the traffic. And whether that's the roundabout or, there's plans on somebody's drafting board right now to look at the main street. It's underway. We're also planning to do improvements to First West, maybe the light, all of those types of mitigation things need to happen, and rapidly, actually, because growth is happening faster than we can imagine it. So I guess I'll make a motion that we continue it for 2 weeks and get some of these things out of our mind, at least resolved. I'd like to meet with Jeff and talk to him about some of these things. Maybe meet with Kevin. I'd like to get some better things. So that's my motion.
I'll second that.
Do we have a motion to continue for 2 weeks then?
So the next council meeting, yeah.
The next council meeting?
Yeah, it's a little longer than 2 weeks.
March
Okay.
2nd.
All right, till March 2nd. Any discussion on that? All
I
in
guess
favor?
So my only hesitancy would be that it's going to be really difficult to judge traffic impact just because of all, as
In
Tom
2
pointed out,
weeks.
all of the changes on First West. So, I mean, we're not going to know until that housing is done on First South and First West, until the Wonder Bread is done, until this, I mean, I think we can get some of the information that Paul outlined, which would be great. But I think ultimately we're all gonna be still be making a decision in a vacuum of facts because of the changes that we see. So
Yep, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Paul, go ahead.
We can't wait until those projects are done to hold these hostage, I don't think.
Yeah, Paul's got his hand up. Paul?
I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly and I get you the right data. You're just wanting traffic counts, which will tell you there's a lot of cars, but won't tell you any mitigation for the cars or plans or projects or anything like that. It'll just say there's a lot of traffic. That's what you're wanting, correct?
Well, Tom said he would like to know if there are any mitigations planned.
is that going to be a roundabout?
Well, and as the mayor stated, we're working on transportation master plan. There's currently not a project slated for that
That
intersection.
intersection. Okay.
And the first step would be to do a warrant study, and I'd have to look to see if one's been done there previously. And if it is warranted, then the next step is to get in line for funding. So no, there currently isn't a project slated there right now. And a traffic count won't um, won't tell us what the project should be or what the solution is either.
So Paul, what would be the impact if indeed a roundabout were the choice, as is in the Woodruff plan? What is the impact to the property? I mean, a roundabout takes some property in the corners. And if this project is right up to the corner, it precludes a roundabout, correct?
It could preclude taking property from that corner for a roundabout. It might shift it to the west or something like that, or the south. But there's not a roundabout designed. As a matter of fact, if I understand Russ correctly, there's not a project submitted to even figure what the impact would be at this point.
I think that's kind of a pipe dream. I would like to dig into what Jeff's letter says a little more. It was just a brief look, but there were some points there that I'd like to look at. I don't think a traffic count's going to help me at all. I think it has to be analyzed with somebody else looking at it that's smarter than I am.
That'll give us some time to do a little bit of research though. So, all right. Ready for a vote? All those in favor of continuing this until the next time we meet, please say aye.
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 Okay.
Any opposed? Let's continue this till next time. All right. Give us some time to mull it over and get some more information. All right, let's go on to resolution 21-08, consideration of a proposed resolution establishing the Woodruff Neighborhood Plan. Aaron Smith, you're with us.
I'm here.
Wonderful. Can you
His wife has been
briefly
here the whole time.
can you briefly go over this? I would like to tell the council that we put together a neighborhood meeting last week, which was very well attended. We had great attendance there. Aaron did an amazing job presenting, and we had probably 25 people that attended in person and many people who attended virtually as well too. So I felt very successful with our attempt to get some feedback from the neighborhood. Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to cover that we were able to have that neighborhood meeting. That was great. I appreciate neighborhood leadership and council members who helped put that together. I went through the same slides that I went through with all of you during the workshop. Other than that, between last meeting and today, there were comments received regarding 600 South. I just wanted to clarify the plan doesn't propose any extension of 600 South between Park Avenue and 500 West. I just wanted to clarify that. Was there any specific questions or areas of the plan that you'd like me to address? There were some conversations about 100 West. The roundabouts proposed is just a type of pedestrian improvement that could ease crossing, but I mean, if that ends up a signal with bulb outs, there's a lot of solutions there, but that's just, I just second what comments were received to make sure that those intersections, as we increase density and increase traffic along First West, become more pedestrian safe. And that's really what the principle of the plan is. So you tell me if there's other areas you'd like to go back over. I'm happy to.
I'm good.
Tom, I saw your mouth moving, Tom, but I think you're muted.
Sometimes I just move my mouth and nothing comes out anyway, so I'm sorry. You talked about in the report, by the way, compliments on the report. I think it's excellent. And I think Woodruff, you know, it's really becoming, it's improving nicely. It's very good. But to say that in a certain area, it should just be single family, I think that there's a little bit of a problem. I've read in a lot of places that the best neighborhoods are where you have a mix. I'm not saying a high density next to a single family. I'm saying that there's somewhat of a mix and a little better social, it provides for a little better social integration. And then it doesn't cram all the density into another part of the city. It spreads it out just a little bit. It's just a thought. I've lived in very nice neighborhoods that had some apartments across the street and they were just fine.
You're talking about a PUD, Tom.
I was just gonna say, we're somewhat limited with the zoning regulations that we have. I would be very open to a broader conversation regarding more mixed residential options at lower densities, but
That's what I'm talking about, is I think it ought to be entered into the conversation. I'm not, it's not an absolute right now.
So Aaron, were there any comments during the meeting that you and Mark were at regarding anything along 10th West? I know we did get one email with questions about being near the highway and wanting to see if there was going to be potential for school on that side, but did anything specific come out of the meeting that you had about 10th West and the division that creates in Woodruff?
I think both points were raised on both at least to me privately, about being able to move along 10th West is an asset, but I think most folks understood the need for increased signalization connectivity to be able to safely get on it, make your left turns, make your right turns. It really is a barrier. And I think with the signalization that's proposed and what just came online at 200 South, it's an improvement, but nothing specific that I recall beyond that from our
Out of the neighborhoods, okay.
Yeah, I would say that there were a lot of great comments, and I really appreciated the participation that we got. My takeaways were: we love the trails, we love the bike paths, we love the blue trail. They like that there's open spaces and that we're planning for open spaces and for more parks, but still keeping that agrarian kind of rural feel to the west part of Logan, and especially the Woodruff neighborhood. There were some concerns about 10th, but again, UDOT has a little bit of control and say over that. So there were some good comments put in there as well too. But for the most part, everything was really positive, and it was great to hear from the neighborhood as well too. Any other comments? We can open this up for the public if anyone wanted to comment, or we good?
Mm-hmm.
All right. If there's anyone in our public who's attending that would like to make a comment, now's your opportunity for resolution 21-08 or public comment. We've got
Mark,
yeah, we've got one. Yeah, go ahead, look, Ernesto.
I wonder if we should make that invitation in Spanish as well.
The what? Sorry, I didn't catch all that, Ernesto.
The invitation for comment in Spanish.
Oh, yes,
We do have the
absolutely.
ability to translate.
Would you like to do that for me, Ernesto?
Sure. Ahora es el momento en esta parte de la audiencia en que podemos escuchar los comentarios de la comunidad acerca de este plan para el vecindario de Woodruff. Así que si a usted le gustaría participar, asegúrese de presionar para alzar su mano en Zoom para que podamos darle la oportunidad de participar. Gracias.
Gracias. All right, we've got one comment. Again, I'll remind you, keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And if you please introduce yourself and where you live, that would be excellent. We've got one participant with their hand up. Here we
Hello,
go.
Council. My name is Keller Ames. I actually live out in Wellsville, but I was reading about this in the Herald Journal this morning. I just wanted to take the opportunity to state how important I believe it's going to be for Logan to implement its master bicycle and pedestrian plan as there's more and more development west of 10th West. We, I believe, are moving into the beginnings of large growth, as we've talked about previously in this meeting. And as we've talked about, car traffic is a problem. We are experiencing more and more car traffic, and I think one of the best ways to mitigate that is to provide alternative routes of transportation, specifically bicycle and pedestrian. So I would just wanted to place an importance on including thoughts about bicycle and pedestrian as this growth happens. Thank you. That was all.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much for your comment. We appreciate that coming from Wellsville, and there's some great things happening in some of the plans, especially on the highway out there that are,
Well,
are
and
forthcoming.
while I've got you, we talked about the growth of Nibley, and Wellsville is going to be growing as well. So as a citizen of Wellsville and as someone who grew up in Wellsville, we are a bedroom community of Logan, but we are car locked. There is no way to leave Wellsville and get to Logan without a car. And I don't want to see that happening in other areas of Cache Valley. And I would like to see us move away from that. If I could bicycle to Logan, I would. I would be one less car in Logan every time I go in there. So I believe that it's very important for us to facilitate that, as well as potentially moving bike paths away from car use roads. For as a bicyclist, you don't want to be breathing next to an automobile. So just keep that in mind as we're growing and as we're evolving, that more bikes equal less cars.
There you go. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your comment, participating. Haven't seen any other hands come up. So if we want to bring that back to the council for action.
Could I ask a question of Aaron? I didn't study in detail, or at least it didn't pop up till right now. Are we preserving the wetland and, not wetland, but the riparian areas that are adjacent to the wetlands throughout this area?
Most of those have what we call a X overlay in the future land use plan, which just designates that they have significant on-site constraints for development. But as far as identifying specific areas for any sort of easement or protection, really the plan suggests that we conduct a comprehensive open space plan for Logan City. Woodruff alone is a little bit too myopic just to single out for a citywide policy on open space. So that's really what the plan identifies areas, but looks at hopefully future planning efforts that could be more comprehensive.
I've seen, and I think it's been tried here, to create trails along canals, along rivers. And if the land is purchased and private property owns up to the river, you'll never get a trail through there. And if we can preserve that ability to put a trail through alongside the fronts of wetlands and rivers, I think we'd be serving the future generations very well. That's just a speech.
I'm open for a motion.
Well, I'll continue speaking then, and I'll move that we accept this beautiful Woodruff plan.
I'll second that.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor of acceptance of resolution 21-08, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the resolution is approved. Thank you all. Sorry that took so long, but good discussion. Moving on to our workshop items. Rich Anderson, you've got some budget adjustments for us.
Yeah, two items to consider tonight. The first is a request to appropriate $11,400 in a CLEF grant for our library. This is a grant that we receive each year. Second is a request to appropriate $207,600 from our EMS fund reserve. This is our newly formed EMS fund for the purchase of a new ambulance. So the first one's a grant, second one is a request to appropriate reserve funds. We do have those on hand, but the fund is going to be a little bit tight as we get going and have cash flow coming back in for the services that are being provided. So,
but you anticipate cash flow coming back, correct?
Eventually we do. But, it's a little slower than I was hoping right now, but hopefully it'll start picking up.
Any questions for Director Anderson?
Nope.
Not from me.
Right. Excellent. Very good. Rich, thank you so much for joining us and for your patience. Next up, we've got a consideration of a proposed sale of real property owned by Logan City. Mayor, are you presenting that, or is someone else?
You're muted. Oh, there she is.
There we go.
Does planning staff have any
There.
any visuals for us on that? Again, the background on that is in 2016, the Deer Pen subdivision in the Hillcrest area was approved by Planning Commission, but for some reason it was never recorded. So we went back to Planning Commission just to be completely transparent. We let the Hillcrest Neighborhood Council know, to let them know we are going to go ahead and record that with the intent to sell that. And then the reason we are selling it, again, we think it's a good time. The development has really increased up there. Again, I think people are more comfortable with that development now. The money for that, because it was prior to that, was going to be cemetery property, and we have no need for that at this point. So the money will go back into the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund. And we desperately need a new irrigation system in the cemetery, which is a very, very expensive project for that much acreage, and just working around all the graves, the roads, everything else. So we'd like to move ahead with that. So our intent is, again, the mayor has the authorization to sell property. If it's over a certain amount, we do have to publicly notice that and have a public hearing. That is what we're doing with this. And so if there are any questions, again, we will get an appraisal. So we kind of have a minimum bid, and we'll, again, try and let this do some kind of a public process. So anyone that wants to bid on that has a fair shot.
So Mayor Daines, there was, as I said earlier, Michael Timmons wrote a letter with several concerns, one of which was a stipulation on fencing that might abut the future park that will be west of this subdivision. Did you receive that information, and will you be considering including those restrictions into any kind of bidding process?
Yes, I have a meeting set up with staff, which includes parks, engineering, community development, to discuss that, some of those concerns in the next few days. So we will address those concerns and see what makes sense to do.
Okay, because I think that, I do believe that we have the opportunity to make this be beautiful development or not.
Right, and again, it's part of
it would behoove us to make it beautiful.
And the other part of this equation is, as we move ahead and sell this, again, the city we're not in the development business. We'll simply sell the raw land and let a developer put in the improvements. But we do intend to go ahead and develop that proposed Deer Pen Park, which is envisioned as a natural area with some walking paths. And we'll be scheduling a meeting for some neighborhood input on that. Again, we have some potential designs done by Michael Timmons, who is, again, on the Parks Committee, a member of that, lives in that neighborhood, a professor of landscape architecture. So we kind of have a general plan of where we're moving with that park design.
But I do think some of his comments were critical to the success of that park.
Right. There were some that were very well taken. So we do have a meeting set up.
Okay. So I'm assuming, Mayor, during that meeting, I guess, for people who don't know, I live in this neighborhood for a brief period longer. And so I do agree that some of the sight lines from the park and things like that, as those lots are developed, might be imperative. So I guess understanding what excuse me, what conditions you might put on it as it goes out to bid and as that land is developed. Because they're not currently in our existing zoning, to specifically say in this neighborhood, these types of fences are or are not allowed. I don't think we've ever spot zoned fences for 22 specific lots. So I guess it would be helpful when we come back and do the public hearing on this to have an understanding of what would be possible for you as the mayor when you put this up for sale, what kind of restrictions could be done at that phase.
Great, I will plan to report back to you.
Yeah, if there's like some sort of CCNR or something like that that can be put on the entire project that stipulates some of those things, that would be nice to know.
Thank you, we'll look at that.
Thank you.
I think that was the gist of a lot of the comments at the planning level and many of the comments that I've heard just walking in the neighborhood as people have raised to me is, yeah, they don't want to look up from the park and see vinyl fencing or see, super high roof lines that are stark in color. So
white. White was mentioned. But some of that is already in the development, in the code.
Correct.
Although there is a bill in the legislature, in the House, that would basically take away all cities' rights to regulate things like color, materials. So who knows? We may not even have the ability to regulate that after the session ends. We'll see.
I think they've been working on that one.
Yeah. That's been.
So, okay, Mayor, planning staff, thank you so much for presenting that. I'm sure we'll have more questions next time around as well too. So, all right, thank you staff for the workshop items. Under our other considerations, patiently waiting, we've had Professor Damon Kahn. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Damon. He's got a presentation for us on voter district systems or voting systems. So Professor Kahn, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Glad to be here. I never imagined when I came to Cache Valley that I would be able to have the entire Logan City Council in my guest room with me this evening. Thank you for the invitation to join you all.
Well, and I also have to just put in a little plug here and let you know that Damon, and I think it's Can, is that correct, Damon?
Yes, that's right.
Okay,
he is actually the mayor of North Logan. So his day job is a university professor, and this is his area of expertise. But he was a city council member for North Logan, and then when the mayor had to step down because of health reasons, he jumped into that position. So kudos to him for his service there as well, and we appreciate him being here tonight. Thanks.
Thanks, Holly. It's been fun to be a part of a city council meeting tonight and not have to worry about saying aye or nay or any of those kinds of things, and fun to have a little bit of insight into how things are going in Logan. But tonight I'm not here for neighborhood municipal sabotage or any such thing. I'm here in my capacity as a political scientist. So fingers crossed that the screen share has begun, and then we'll go ahead and click that, and it looks like that's going. So
it looks great. Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Tonight, I had the opportunity to visit with the committee that you all put together to look at the question of using district-based elections as opposed to at-large. And I want to say I had a really great conversation with that group, they asked great questions, and I think we're really working their very best to do the best job that they could in evaluating the question. Want to give a shout out and some kudos to them for their work and their efforts in engaging on the issue. And it's a tough issue, in my opinion, because If you are looking at the issue right now and think, oh, this is an easy one, we should definitely do X, then I don't think you've thought about the issue as much as I think you should. If you feel a little bit of uncertainty, then that's probably a healthy place to be looking at this from, because it really is genuinely a difficult, complex and multifaceted issue. If we had figured out that there was a single best way to do it for every city, then every city would already be doing it that single best way. And yet we see quite the diversity of approaches here. So just a couple of things that I'll share, just kind of starting at the very basic level. There are a variety of things that a municipal government in Utah has at their disposal to change in terms of the nature of their electoral systems and electoral processes. And then there's a bunch of things that you cannot change. Things that you can't change include the date of the election, the length of terms that city council members or mayors serve, or any of the other wide variety of things that are set in state law. But you do have choices that allow you to change a variety of things if you so choose. For example, cities can change their partisan or nonpartisan format of their election if they are a town or cities of the third, fourth, or fifth class. First and second class cities in Utah cannot change to a partisan format. They must be nonpartisan. Incidentally, I would not recommend a change from your current nonpartisan system. I think there's maybe one city in Utah that still uses a partisan election format. Issue space is very different in municipal politics than in partisan politics. So I recommend not bringing those partisan considerations in. You can change your approach on primary elections, and there's some interesting things happening here statewide. You can choose a nominating convention that looks kind of like what the party caucuses look like in our partisan elections, as opposed to a primary election, which is what you're using right now. And just recently, the state has opened up an option for municipalities to experiment with ranked choice voting and get just one election done that gets things out of the way in one shot, taking into account people's first, second, third, fourth, and so on preferences. You can choose mail-in ballots versus election day voting. And of course, the purpose for which we're talking tonight is you can choose between having individuals elected from districts versus having a city council that is elected at large. So let's dig into that a little bit. You're already probably familiar with the core questions of what happens in each of these approaches. But if you have single member district elections, the city is divided into some number of districts. Each district selects one representative to the city council. This results in better geographic representation. A number of cities in the state use this approach. Salt Lake City, for example, you have their district map on the screen in front of you here. Harriman uses a district-based system to select their representatives on the city council as well. A second option is to use at-large elections where the city becomes essentially one giant district from which multiple members are elected. There are some number of seats available, say 3 if there's no mayor on the ballot in Logan. And then each voter gets up to 3 votes, and then whichever candidates win the most votes, the 3 candidates with the highest vote totals win those 3 available seats. Examples obviously include Logan, and Orem City uses this approach as well. And then we have a mixed system. I couldn't come up with a good image for mixed system. So there's a mixing truck and a hand mixer. I'm sorry, that's pretty lame. But most in a mixed system, as you might imagine, it's a combination or hybrid approach of the previous 2 that we've looked at. Here, most council members are selected from single member districts. However, some number of council members, typically 1 to 3, would be selected in an at-large election. So for example, if you go to West Valley City, a bunch of the representatives there are represented in districts. I think it's five, a 7-member council in West Valley with 5 who are selected from districts. And then there are 2 at-large positions. And so you get a little bit of both, trying to play up the advantages and downplay the relative disadvantages of both systems by trying to make them both happen together. So if you look across the state, the at-large system is far and away the most common across all of Utah's cities. However, the rationale for going to an at-large, going away from an at-large system is most compelling in cities as they get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? My wife's hometown of Mayfield, Utah, she always says it's grown a great deal since she was a kid. There's like 500 people there now. And so they've really ramped up there. They have neighborhoods in Mayfield. You can go to the Order or Christianburg or kind of the Old Town area. But the reality is there's only one community of interest. They all live in the same, if you did districts, you would have like 20 houses or fewer in each district in the city of Mayfield. There's not a really compelling reason to do districts if you live in a really small town. But as cities get bigger, so notwithstanding the fact that the at-large system is the most common across all of Utah's cities, when you get to Utah's biggest cities, those that are about over 20 or 40,000 population, the 20 largest cities, you actually see a much greater diversity of choices here. Among the 20 largest, 8 use single-member districts, 4 use a mixed system, and 4 use the at-large system. If you just kind of look down the list here. And so in terms of geography and population size, I would say that as Logan grows and getting to the size where your community is at now, this is an appropriate time to reflect on what the right choice is for your city at this point in time. Are things at a point or situation where you feel like you could get better governance by making a change in the system? It's a very reasonable question to be asking. Now, you might, sometimes when I do my political science, consulting type work on questions like this, then people say, well, Damon, just tell us what the best thing is for us to do. I would do that if I felt like I could give you a single best answer. But politics also involves value judgments about what you think is best or most important, what you think the issues, problems, or challenges you have in good governance right now. And those are things that you need to consider as policymakers for Logan City are evaluating and making decisions about this question. So we'll talk through some pros and cons that are informed by the academic literature and then leave it to you guys to do what your job requires that you do here. So thinking about district elections, the strongest and clearest pro of district elections is better geographic representation. Many cities will see that in some communities, some segments of the portion of their city, they just don't see a lot of participation. They don't see a lot of engagement. They don't see a lot of folks coming in and participating in what's going on in the municipality. And the intent of district elections is to, in essence, make it so you have to get people from certain parts of the community to come in and engage and participate in what's going on. District elections are really good at encouraging geographic representation because someone's ability to get elected and then to be re-elected, if they are interested in that, hinges on keeping constituents not from the entire community happy, but keeping constituents from their specific area of a community happy. Now, there are some other things that go along with this. One is you get better representation of racial minorities under district elections, but there's a specific and clear caveat to this. And that is true if and only if the minorities are concentrated in those specific neighborhoods. If minorities are spread equally around a city, district-based elections will not help you get better minority representation. But if you see centralized pockets of people from a particular racial background, then your district elections can elevate your likelihood of getting those racial minorities represented. The council members in district elections will be more aware of unique and specific needs for their geography. Those are the roads they drive on when they go to work. Those are the people they run into at the grocery store, and they know the nature and situation of the turf that they specifically represent. And again, as cities grow and get larger and larger, it becomes harder and harder for every elected official to have that same level of experience with every part of a community. It's not impossible, but as cities get bigger and bigger, I think certainly it's easy to make the case that by the time you get the size of Salt Lake City or West Valley, it's a lot more difficult to do that. When you're as small as Mayfield, Utah, it's not terribly difficult to do that. Where's the point in between where you want to make a change to achieve that goal? That's a value judgment for the council to consider. There are a couple of potential cons with district elections, though. One is we tend to see lower levels of candidate recruitment, right? You have an extra qualification that's imposed on someone in order to be able to run for office, and that is where they live. And so district elections, especially once that one incumbent is in there and there's one and only one incumbent, then you may see fewer individuals running candidacies for district elections, generally speaking. A second worry with district elections is that council members will be tempted to prioritize their district's concerns over citywide concerns. To use a congressional example, so as not to make anyone feel uncomfortable in municipal politics, if you represent the Utah 1st District in Congress, you care a great deal about what happens at Hill Air Force Base, because Hill Air Force Base employs, it may well be the largest employer in the entire congressional district. I don't know, it's got to be close if it's not tops. And so, now you also have to care about the overall strength of the US military. But if you have a choice to make the US military a little bit stronger, or to make funding and economic prosperity in your district a lot better, what choice are you going to make? The incentives behind district elections incentivize someone to make the choice that puts them in the best stead with their constituents, which may or may not be what's the best thing overall for the city. And then one last con to just quickly mention is negative campaigning becomes a little bit easier in the context of district elections because you are running against a specific person. And so campaigns and the nature of them can become a little bit more contentious and direct. Now, some people may say this means we're doing better at accountability. Other people may say they don't like the tone and the nature of the politics, but that's just one set of things to consider there. For at-large districts, there are a variety of pros. One pro is there's no need to actually create districts. Under state law, there's some rules that were recently put in place that required some form of approximate districting because you have to get if you have an initiative, a referendum that's brought to the ballot, that you have to get some number of signatures in different parts of the city. But those don't necessarily map into or require any form of districting. And they don't necessarily require the same degree of maintenance as district-based elections do to meet constitutionality standards for the one person, one vote standard. So districts it creates an additional set of work that the city needs to create and then to maintain to make sure the districts are well drawn and appropriately and constitutionally drawn. An additional pro, all members of the city council take a citywide view and have to have the interests of the, or have an interest in every vote in the city, because every vote across the city has an equal amount of weight. It makes candidate recruitment a little bit easier. Again, you don't have to take on one specific person, and you can throw your hat into the ring without having any additional extra requirements in place for what it takes to make a candidacy. And it makes negative campaigning a little bit more difficult. When you're running in an at-large election, you're all running together for an office, but you're not running against a particular person. Some studies suggest that you get a little bit better of gender balance out of at-large elections. It's not a huge effect, but there's some reason to believe you get somewhat better gender balance in at-large elections than you do in district-based elections. Some cons of at-large elections is that there is no guarantee. One is that there is no guarantee of representation for some areas of the city, or for any particular area of the city, and so you can at times see clustering or clumping of representation, and some areas of the city tending to elect lots of people, and some other areas of the city tending to elect few, if any, representatives to the city council. A second potential con is that in an at-large election, it's easier for one coalition with similar interests to win. Say you had a group of 3 individuals who said, we're all going out with this set of ideas, and tried to get everyone to use all 3 of their votes to vote for them. Then, if everyone, if that group of 3 is able to get a majority of people to come out in their support, then they will, all 3 of them will be elected, and you sweep a majority coalition into office with just one election transpiring. If you've got them spread out across districts, that's a little more difficult for things to, for that kind of thing to happen. A couple of specific issues that I want to go over with in particular. One is diversity. And I already mentioned this a little bit earlier. Districts are really good at promoting geographic diversity. You cannot fail to achieve geographic diversity if you use districts. They will only promote other forms of diversity, say racial diversity, for example, to the extent that those groups, the other forms of diversity that you want to encourage, also are clustered within district boundaries, the way those lines are drawn. And then obviously districting won't help with gender diversity, and in fact, women candidates tend to see slightly higher rates of success in at-large systems. Voter turnout, it's been a few years since we saw a comprehensive look at this, but Hajnal and Lewis back in almost 20 years ago found that did not find systematic evidence of clear and consistent effects on voter turnout. Really what's going to drive your turnout more than anything else is electoral competitiveness. If you have, I guess it takes I may not be very smart or good at politics if I show up in a council meeting of my sister city and tell them that they need more competitive elections. But I think all of you have values where you care about the health and well-being of representation and governance in your city. And I don't think any of you would be afraid of having to engage in a competitive election. If you want to see higher levels of voter turnout, what you really need are basically more competitive elections. And when we have more competition in elections, we see more turnout regardless of which system or approach is used. Last of all, redistricting requirements are tricky. This isn't necessarily a reason to not have districts. And in fact, there are a handful of instances where in egregious circumstances, courts have actually struck down at-large election systems as being biased against, particularly on racial grounds, people from a particular race or ethnic group. But if you're going to consider doing district elections, you do need to think through what the requirements would need to look like for what your districts would need to look like. And so, first of all, you need to know your districts have to be roughly equal in size. As Chief Justice Earl Warren said, legislators represent people, not trees or acres. Legislators are elected by voters, not farms or cities or economic interests. And so you have to have districts that are roughly equal in size of population, not in terms of ground or buildings or acres or any of those kinds of things. Constitutional standards say that council districts should be contiguous, they should be compact, they should preserve communities of interest, and you generally want to nest your political boundaries in others. Now at the municipal level, that probably isn't a huge consideration, although you do have, say, state legislative districts that cut through your city, and you would probably want to give some consideration to how those lines cut through Logan if you are drawing other political boundaries within the city. And you have to go through a process at least every 10 years based on the census to keep those population sizes roughly approximate. You don't need citations and such, but at that rate, you all seem to be remarkably awake, notwithstanding that it's late, and I'd be happy to talk through any questions or things you all would like to discuss, if you'd like.
I know you're brimming with questions, so Damon, that's wonderful. It gives us so much information to digest and to go over. Thank you.
So Damon, I have one question, and I am embarrassed that I have to ask it, but how are the number of seats at the municipal level determined? Like, we have 5 seats in Logan. Is that based on our population, or what's the deciding factor for that?
Gotcha. So right now, Logan City has actually has the strong mayor form of government, and that makes you guys a little bit different from most of the cities in Utah that have either a 5-member council or 6-member council form of government. If you wanted to increase the number of seats on your city council, I need to double check, but it might actually take a state legislative act to alter the Logan City charter. I don't know if that's something that you could adjust simply by a motion of the or an action of the city council.
Okay. And I always love calling out professors, but in FYI, I believe that Provo is mixed. In talking with one of their council members, they have now currently 5 districts and 2 at large.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Damon, or Professor, I guess we could, or Mayor, we should call you.
Damon is my favorite title.
You talked about the requirement that each district, if it was to create a district, would be equal or roughly equal in population. Is there an effort? You know, the committee has brought up issues of wealth, and single family, and not single, home ownership, you know, other characteristics. And I don't know how you make them all, quote, equal. Is it only population, or do you try to, you know, there are wealthier sections and there are less wealthy sections, but how do you do all that?
That is a great question. There's a reason why congressional districts are frequently litigated, Tom. And it's because it's a tricky and difficult issue. And because we do know that the way district boundaries are drawn has effects on who ends up being elected and representing those districts. So sometimes you could consider, for example, you know, under communities of interest, you could you might even say that there are people who are like each other in certain ways and might want to be represented together, and might make it easier for them to be represented if they share certain things in common within that community of interest. And so It could be possible, we have examples nationally of majority minority districts where individuals who are, where district lines are drawn to catch lots of minorities of a particular ethnic minority into their district. And therefore be much more likely to elect someone who looks like them in that district. You could group it by income and draw a district such that people had a similar income dynamic and be more likely to elect someone from that same socioeconomic background to the council. And so those are all things that you could consider doing if you were to draw districts. In addition to simply just looking for compactness and contiguity. If you chose, you could go after those things. One thing that I won't say do it, I won't say don't do it, but here's something to think about if you do it. If you do it and you draw districts to improve, to make it more likely to represent a particular minority, whether it's racial or if it's on the basis of income or whatever else, you want to think about two things. First of all, you will increase your likelihood of getting that person represented, which arguably is a good thing. There's also a secondary consequence to this though, and that is when you pack everybody from one background into one district, they might only be 20–30% of the city overall. And if you pack them into one district, then you are also sucking them out of all the other districts. And so you create one district where folks are really focused on, where it's very easy to elect someone of a particular racial background, or really easy to elect someone with a level of socioeconomic status or wealth or those kinds of things. But you do risk making it so that none of the other representatives in that city, the other four, don't have any interest at all any longer, other than goodwill, which we hope it matters to people, but their direct constituency-induced preferences won't necessarily reflect those considerations. And so if you're going to embark on a mission to elect a particular kind of representative in one district, you want to be aware of the fact that it changes incentives for the other districts in the city as well.
But if you don't have like a majority of that particular minority in that district, it doesn't really help them at all, does it?
Depends on voter turnout, right?
So it depends on turnout. The best statistics say it doesn't necessarily require a 50%, at least on race in congressional districts is where a lot of this evidence is. Those studies show that it doesn't take a threshold of 50% to actually get that kind of election. It's really going to kick in a lot in congressional elections, I should say. It kicks in more typically at about 40%, a 40% threshold. But again, how well that transfers to a municipal context, I don't have a lot of specific evidence to point to say that that threshold would necessarily be higher or lower in this context. Turnout being as low as it is in municipal elections, I think that points to that being much more of a factor.
So Damon, could I ask a question? And it's related to voter turnout. If you create districts, and one of the concerns that was expressed by the committee was that you could have one district where 200 people elect someone to the council, and they have equal sway with the other candidate who had to be elected by 3,000 people or 2,000 people in order to be elected, because they had historically higher voter participation in whatever, that geographic area. How, and I realize this is very philosophical, but is it more important for a city to deal with voter participation, or is it more important, is the geography, despite the lack of participation to get them there, more important?
That's a great question, Jeannie. It is a very philosophical question, and I'll beg your forgiveness while probably deftly dodging it. I think that's a value judgment more than it is an empirical question. And so, the vantage point I'm trying to come to in giving you guys guidance here is empirically based, evidence-based, literature-driven items. And I don't have an empirically based answer to that question. I think one could make a strong philosophical case either way. Right? You look at a situation where if you have one district, right, it's equal in population, not equal in voter turnout. So you could draw one, you could probably draw a district in Logan City where voter turnout was under 5%. You could probably draw a district in Logan City where voter turnout was over 30%, which, sad as it is to say, is like the high watermark for municipal elections. I'm preaching to the choir and saying that people have more influence in changing the outcome of their daily lives by voting in a municipal election than they ever will in a presidential election. But you guys understand that well, and I think a lot of the people who are engaging in this meeting understand that well. So you could get to that caricature district where one person was elected by a relatively small number of people and someone was elected by a relatively large number of people. How do you balance that state of affairs with a situation where one could imagine there was a particular piece of geography that never got anyone elected to the city council? How do I, neither of those are a terribly happy state of affairs. Really what you need in either of those situations is both of them are waiting for a civic-minded community entrepreneur to come out and engage folks who care about their city and should want to engage, but either don't know how, don't know that they should, or haven't had anyone give them a good reason why they need to do it. In either instance, I think the bigger influence is a civic-minded municipal entrepreneur who reaches out to those people and gets them to come in and gets them to engage. And that someone who can come in and do that will be successful in an election, no matter what kind of elections you're having in your city. But unfortunately, you can't just, you can't, by motion of the city council, create such an individual. You have to find them, you have to motivate them, and you have to, in some instances, be that person. And so I hope that's, not me saying I'm not going to try to answer your question, Jeannie, simply to say it's a tough question to address from the vantage point I'm trying to approach these questions. Ernesto, you had I want to respect the chair of the meeting.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead. Yeah,
okay,
go right
Ernesto,
ahead.
please proceed.
Yes, in a mixed system, how do you decide what would be the steps to decide how many of the seats are at large versus districts?
Gotcha. This is an area of law I haven't looked at in depth. And so I can't give you very specific advice here. I can't give you legal advice anyways, because I'm not an attorney, but what
You look like
would,
one.
That's I've never played one on television either, but but a couple things I'd encourage you to think about. If your city council gets too, it would be highly unusual to see more than, say, 7 members of a city council on a city council. Basically, anyway, there's a few places that'll go to 9. But it starts to get unwieldy for municipal government. It starts to look a lot more like and require the trappings of organization that you'd have in a legislature, with committees and subcommittees and a lot of specialization, just a lot of things that we don't typically or traditionally see in municipal government. So based on what you see in other cities, I would say if you went over 7, you'd have a municipal body that was much more difficult to work with and run in a way that is consistent with the way most municipalities run in Utah. When you have a mixed system, it is virtually always the case that the mixed system has mostly a majority of district-based individuals. And so a typical split would probably be 4 or, if you had a 7-member council, say a 4 or 5 elected from districts and 2 or 3 that were elected at large. And, I think there are examples in the state that may be as small as a 5-member council, but say 4 districts and 1 at-large member. So if that gives you a sense of where things are conventionally set in this context, that's kind of the neighborhood where most of these are at.
If a person, if a city had a hybrid, and I'm going to say 3 districts and 2 at large, just because we have 5, would a person apply to say, I want to be from District 1 or 3 or whatever? Or would they say, I want to be at large? Or do you just get 3 people and the 2 others are at large? I mean, how does that work?
Gotcha. So first of all, if you do district elections, typically you would require someone to live in the district where they are running. Otherwise, you're really kind of looking at a designated seat style election where I say, I'm going to run for seat 1, but seat 1 doesn't mean anything. It's just one other than someone sitting in seat 1 and I want to sit in that seat myself. If you were going to do that, I don't see any advantage in doing that, going to districts without having a geographic residency requirement. So someone would say, if I live in District 1, then I could say I'm going to run for City Council in District 1, or I could choose to run for an at-large City Council seat. I could not choose to run in District 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the at-large seats could be run basically the same way you run your at-large elections right now, with say 2, if they both fell on the same cycle, every person gets 2 votes in that election, the top 2 vote getters advance. If you had if you had 2 of those, I would recommend probably staggering the at-large seats. So you had 1 at-large election every 2 years, rather than having 2 every 4 years. That just gives less turnover and allows you to say you're running against 1 person in that context. So that would probably be the general structure that would be sketched out if you were looking at that.
In your presentation, you talked about electoral competitiveness as the best predictor of turnout. Is there any other factors that you know of or that you could cite that impact voter turnout besides that competitiveness that we should be aware of?
Well, yes, and yes, there are. But they're not going to be helpful for a council that's trying to encourage and invigorate turnout in the short term. Level of education is a very strong, clear predictor of engagement and voter participation. However, obviously, the Logan City Council can't just grant bachelor's degrees. I know some people who are very enthusiastic about education, but
yeah, petition President Cockett to give us that power and authority.
I love it. Yeah, that would be great. But education, the level of income tends to correlate. Those things are hard for a governing body to just change. So that doesn't help. But things that can help, at least in the long term, in my opinion. You referenced your Woodruff neighborhood plan. I understand that Logan has these neighborhood districts that kind of function as a next level down level of advisory boards. I think this is a fantastic concept because one of the things that increases voter participation is a development of skills for civic engagement. And so across the socioeconomic spectrum, across race, these kinds of things, if you can help people build the skills that they need for civic engagement, they will be more likely to participate. If you can build a sense of political efficacy, help people to feel like they can engage with the political system and have their voices heard, that helps to lift and encourage political engagement. And so these kinds of processes, to the extent that you can bring people in and say, hey, come to this neighborhood meeting, then they start to say, okay, I'm starting to understand how Logan municipal politics works. And I met some neighbors, or I had a chance to visit with an elected official or a planning commissioner, and now I have their email address. So if I have questions, I can reach out to them, and I feel comfortable reaching out because I've talked to them and visited with them before. If you can help build skills for civic competence and civic engagement through the practices of Logan City, that is something that can build and encourage turnout. Now, it's a long haul process. It's easier than granting bachelor's degrees, but you still have to find them and encourage people to take that first step and find a safe, a positive, encouraging way for them to do that. And we're having some of these same kinds of conversations in North Logan City, if I put my own municipal hat on for a moment. And we have the experience where we hold a neighborhood meeting and we ask people to come out and tell us what they'd like to see in the future. And I've been to those meetings and had 2 people show up. And that's a challenge. One of the things, we were ready to launch a program in April. We kind of sketched things out where we were going to do council on your corner meetings and announce our public meetings and hold them periodically on people's lawns and say, well, if we can't we really can't make it any easier than saying, hey, the council's going to be here talking about your stuff, on your neighbor's corner. And of course, the coronavirus changed the nature of the way we congregate temporarily. And we weren't able to act on that at that time. And we'll see where things go for this summer. But, those kinds of things that we can do to engage, build skills for engagement, that can go a long way in terms of helping people to participate in municipal politics. One last one, voting by mail. Just quickly, I will tell people often that voting by mail does not help with voter participation. And I will say I will defend that stance, and there's good evidence to support it in general elections for major elective office. So if you're electing a governor, a president, a senator, other than the first couple of times you do vote by mail, you don't really get much of you get a bump the first couple of times from a novelty effect, and then it tapers back off. Tends to make it easier for people to vote who already intend to vote. The exception to this, though, that since I have a municipal audience tonight, is the low salience elections. As you guys know, municipal candidates, work their hearts out, knocking doors, passing out flyers, putting up signs, and then you get to the Monday before the election and you run into someone at the grocery store and say, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? And And you're like, well, I'm running for city council. They're like, really? There's an election tomorrow? And you think, oh, how, but the number of people who don't recognize that there are even elections going on in odd numbered years is actually large. And so oddly enough, a ballot showing up in the mailbox in October can be a really great way to remind people that there's an election going on, and you will see some increases in voter participation with vote by mail in a municipal context. Now, that's something you guys are already doing, but I would actually commend that as something that will increase participation, at least among those that are already registered. But people who aren't registered don't get that ballot in the mail. So that's something to consider.
So you mentioned, I have one other question. You mentioned something about the impact of districts on signatures required for referendums. So if I understand that correctly, if Logan went to districts, we would have to have a certain number of signatures in each district versus at large, where it's just a gross number of signatures for a referendum. Is that what you're stating?
No.
Okay.
Thank you for asking, though, because that I clearly did not do a good job of explaining that.
Thanks.
I have a tendency to over communicate those. But I'm going to take just a quick step back and try to do it really fast. If you run a referendum in the state of Utah, then you have to gather a certain number of signatures in at least, I think, 26 out of 29 counties or something like that, as a show of support from different geographic bases, is what the state legislature was going for. So when the state legislature reviewed the referendum and initiative process for municipalities a couple of years ago, there was a mall that was going to get raised and rebuilt as a big mixed-use project down in Salt Lake County, created a great deal of stir. It was referred to the ballot and was defeated at the ballot, and then there was all kinds of legal wrangling. And at that point, the state legislature said, we should take a look at what the municipal initiative or referendum process looks like. And as part of that package of changes, the state said, if there's going to be something referred out of a municipality, it has to have some level of support from different regions or different geographic regions within the city. So it's not enough just to get lots of signatures from one neighborhood to try to get something shot down, but they have to get certain numbers of signatures from across the city. And so every city in the state is now required to have, or at least of some size, is required to have some sort of quasi-district type setup for purposes of getting signatures just for the initiative or referendum process.
And I think we did that with our voter precincts, didn't we, like a year ago? I don't know if Kimber's still on the phone, but I think I do remember us.
Yes, that's correct. We have 8 voter participation areas, and I believe the statute requires signatures in 6 of the 8 for initiatives or referendums.
Okay, thanks.
And while I have the speaker, let me just quickly, I wanted to answer one of the questions about our form of government. The state code specifies our options, and under council mayor, we can have a 5 or a 7, but where we've already created our 5-member council, it would require voter approval to go to a 7-member council and mayor.
Okay.
Cool.
Thanks, Kimber.
So, so you would, those districts, I think you can, I remember discussions with the League of Cities and Towns where there was some discussion about whether you could align them with districts if you had council members elected by district. But it's not necessarily the case that these referendum districts would have to align, as I understand it, with whatever you chose to do in terms of council stuff. So, yes.
Any other questions for Mayor Damon?
That's it.
All right.
Well,
Wearing
you guys,
Professor,
Oh, go
right?
ahead, Tom, sorry.
No, I'm just saying he's wearing the hat of a professor right now.
Well,
you're going to say, Damon.
you guys have your work cut out for you. It's there are good and compelling reasons to look at districts. There are good and compelling reasons to stay at large, in my opinion. And that's not to say anything about the hybrid option in between. It's a tough choice. It's a significant choice. But I applaud you guys for taking a good, serious, hard look at it, and wish you the best. If you have questions, anything you'd like to talk through on this or anything else, feel free to reach out. I'm a big fan of town-gown relationships, and if I can help you guys with anything you're working on from the political science side of things, please feel free to reach out.
I know I said I was done with my questions, but I thought of one more.
Okay.
When you identified the phrase communities of interest, is there some place that we can go to look at, or any materials that you have that kind of identify how does one define a community of interest? You know, you said they share things in common. It could be racial, it could be economic, it could be income. But is there something that I could look to identify how to identify a community of interest and whether or not they're represented or underrepresented?
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a great question. So I would actually encourage you to work with the two outstanding attorneys that you are already here with us on this call, as communities of interest get some greater definition in a range of court cases that have been established over time. It could be as simple as school boundaries, or the way major streets lie. It could be as complex as other affinities or interests or identities. So, that's a good one for legal counsel.
Okay, and so the communities of interest, though, no matter what, still would have to be of those equal population sizes, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Compact, contiguous, isn't strictly speaking a requirement, but I would really recommend, if you did districts, not to create islands and
I used to live in
peninsula.
Illinois. Trust me, I know lots of issues with districts in Illinois.
Peninsulas of exceptional length, not a good idea, because it starts to look like you're drawing with a particular political outcome in mind. And that's, no matter what you do, or no matter what whoever draws the boundaries does, whoever is drawing the boundaries will be accused of having drawn them with a particular political outcome in mind. That's just something you need to be prepared to accept if you do districts.
And has that been done differently in all of the cities that have districts now? Have they each chosen a different methodology for determining districts, or is there's no state standard for that? Is there, as to
I don't believe there's a
who
state
puts
standard.
together a district committee?
I'd recommend an independent redistricting committee to take a look at that. Ultimately, that takes a little bit of the politics out of it, because you have this other group that looks at it, works on it, draws the boundaries. But under state law, my understanding is that the ultimate authority for drawing those boundaries rests with the legislative body of the city. The school district, for example, well, I don't know about Logan City School District, Cache County School District, the school board draws their own boundaries. And there have at times been allegations of the school board drawing boundaries in Cache County for their own political gain, because they're drawing their own districts. Certainly those allegations circulate every time, every 10 years, when the state legislature has redrawn their own districts. So you want to be mindful of that. An independent districting commission can help with that a lot.
But the school districts are legislatively required to have district voting for their school boards. Isn't that correct?
Yes, I believe it is.
Okay.
Last
Yes, sir.
question. Maybe you don't know off the top of your head, from those cities that you listed with their different systems, would you recommend maybe one with each system to look at as having success with better voter turnouts? Or
Boy, that's a great question. You know, I am not well acquainted enough with kind of levels of turnout and such in these different municipalities to make a recommendation. My gut says that if I were in your circumstance, I would probably be talking. I would probably look to have conversations with cities closer to Logan's size. I think you'll learn more from a Draper or a Murray or a Mill Creek than you will from a West Valley or a Provo, simply because the size of the city will be similar. I mean, obviously, Provo would be an interesting comparison because of the university presence and influence, and as well as Ogden, even though those cities are more than twice your size. So I don't have a specific community, but you might to recommend that you'd reach out to. But one place to start might be to look for comparable cities in terms of size. You might look for other cities that are operating under Provo operates under strong mayor form of government as well, if I remember correctly. Amy, I'm on my toes now.
I only know that because I was in conversation with one of their council members on some state legislation issues, and
Gotcha.
I asked her, and she said, yeah, that they had gone to 5 districts and 2 at large, I think relatively recently. So that's the only reason I know that.
I may have, well, that makes me feel better. I may have just missed the change. Look for cities that you think might have some good comparisons with your situation and kind of where you're at as a city. In terms of cities that do great on participation, the city that has the highest level of turnout in Utah in any given municipal election, the top 3 or 4 will inevitably be the cities that are the most rife with scandal and challenge and difficulty. So I would suggest you not look for the top turnout cities and try to emulate them. Again, because competition and attention and getting drawn in that way is a terrible way to increase voter turnout, but it's pretty consistent at being effective. So
I think one of our local Cache County communities experienced that this past year with their council because of some issues. So,
well, Damon, thank you so much for taking the time to share your expertise and knowledge with us. I know you've presented to various state legislatures as a testimony witness, expert witness. So we really appreciate your expert witness testimony today and sharing this with us. Would you mind sharing your presentation so we can have copies of that to take a look at?
I'd be glad to. I'll email it over to you just momentarily here, Mark.
That would be that.
Isn't it in the Google Docs from the subcommittee, or is this a different presentation? No, this is a different one. Okay.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. And thanks for your patience. Really appreciate you waiting to come on, but this was important enough that we really, really wanted to have you come. So thank you. And I apologize for massacring your name to start off with. So
Thanks. Hey, this is great. And now I get to go and do city council again tomorrow night. So I love city council meetings. It'll be great.
we'll try and come join. So yeah, we'll try and come join. So
Good
so
job.
thank you again. Thank you. Yeah. All right. Under other council considerations, very quickly, I just wanted to thank Amy for your hard work and efforts to keep us updated with what's going on with the state legislature, and really appreciate everything that you're doing to do what we would like for Logan City. So thank you for your great efforts.
You're welcome. It's one of those pieces of running for city council that I did not anticipate would be happening, but certainly getting to know legislators around the state right now on a couple of hot issues. So it's been interesting. We did, before we go on to thing, we did have a citizen contact me, and I think Jeannie should talk to you as well, and maybe even Tom. He about 2 pressing issues in his mind. I just wanted to report quickly on those because we say we're going to do, since we don't have the open part at the beginning of our meetings. One was an issue with parking up off of 1200 East. Both Jeannie and I talked to the police department about that today, and they're going to follow up directly with him on his questions and concerns about overnight parking up there. It might be that the street that he was concerned about has not yet been turned over to the city. It's a new development area. So the police are going to follow up with him directly on that. And then his other question, I've already shot an email to Rich about. It was a question about our the carryover or the baseline charge for electric services for rental units. So I'll get a little bit more information from Rich, and maybe we can talk about that at our next meeting.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you so much. I guess we will continue our conversation about our voting system. It sounds like we've got a little bit more information we'd like to look at. I will try and reach out to each one of you individually and see which way you'd like to progress from here on out. But that gives us a little bit more time to look at things and to do some more studying on our own. So thank you for your patience, and I'm sorry that the meeting has gone so long, but I felt like it was important to cover. Anyone have anything else under other considerations for tonight? All right, otherwise we will adjourn our city council meeting, and we will open our Logan Redevelopment Agency meeting and turn the time over to Kirk. You've got some presentations for us.
You bet. Thanks, Chairman Anderson. Sorry to cut your faces off there. I was just making sure I had the share screen and the presentation loaded so we didn't take more time there.
Thank you.
We're excited to bring this resolution to you tonight for the funding of the Center Block Plaza. It's a redevelopment proposal that is at the very heart of so much that's going on here in downtown. Let me just quickly show you a map. I know it's small. This would look better on the screen if we were in the council chambers. But what this shows is various projects that the city's been involved with in one way or another, whether it be through planning or whatever, or incentives granted, that sort of thing. In the very middle of the map, let me see if I can blow this up a little bit. You can see that yellow. That is the Center Block Plaza that's being proposed. The funding that's being proposed for that tonight. Above that, outlined in blue, you see various other projects. You see the Hampton Inn at 200 North Main. You see the proposed new city library on 3rd North. Just north of that, you see the potential mixed use project that we've talked about. And then even on 4th North, you've got the commercial redevelopment occurring there with the soon to happen construction of In-N-Out Burger. Below the Center Block Plaza, of course, adjacent to it, to the south, you've got the Plaza 45. We also acquired the property at 46 North, 100 West, although there's no immediate plans for that property. You've got the entire Center Street, reconstruction project and the new streetscape there that happened a couple years ago. And then moving south, you've got the Mill Creek apartment complex, phase 1, which is under construction, and possibly a phase 2 along First South, First West. L59 apartments at 150 South, 100 East. That's now under that's just starting. And then at the bottom of the map, you see the renewal project that was, the rezone was discussed tonight. So anyway, there's a lot going on there. There's other projects as well. Together, all of these projects will positively impact not just the downtown, but the entire city and really the entire valley as well. So, okay, together, well, over the past several months, the mayor and staff have been working with the architectural firm that we're working with to bring a design forward, which will be brought forward later to the Planning Commission and the Historic Preservation Committee, but a plan that's within the framework of a sound budget, a workable budget. So that's what we're bringing you tonight in Resolution 21-11 RDA. And that consists of first taking down the buildings, demolishing 55 and 67 North Main Street, and then constructing the plaza, center block plaza, and all the associated improvements that go along with that. And these include a stage, a splash pad, and an administration building at the far west of the property, a portable ice rink, and all the associated furnishings and equipment that go along with putting a plaza together. So this will create a destination both in the summertime. You see an aerial view of what the plaza might look like in the summer, and there in the wintertime. The ice rink will be portable. We've decided to go that route. It will save us significant amounts of money and help stretch our RDA dollars a little bit further by going that route. They're excellent rinks. I'll show you some examples here quickly of other communities that have utilized portable rinks. Here's one in Pittsburgh, another one in Carmel, Indiana, and another example of Rapid City, South Dakota. So you can see they look really nice, and that's the proposal, is to go with that. So just in summary, what's being sought for is the funding again for the center block plaza, totaling $4.3 million roughly. And there's the 4 different components of that shown in front of you on your screen. Demolition, 1.3 million. The plaza itself, just over 2 million. The portable ice rink, about 400,000. And then the stage and administration building, about 440,000. The second part of this resolution is for the funding of the improvements at 41 and 45 North Main, commonly referred to as Plaza 45. So these improvements would include the exterior shell, as well as some core reconstruction with those parts of the building, primarily electrical and fire protection, that would need to be reworked. And as you see on the resolution, all of those improvements for Plaza 45 total just shy of $1.6 million. We broke those out into 2 pieces just so that you can see that they're separate, because the intent with Plaza 45 will be, once that exterior shell is done, our ultimate intent is to sell that building off. In fact, we've already had some inquiries on that, so we're moving in that direction, assuming we get your funding approval with the resolution. So with that, I'll take any questions if you have any.
Can I just add one thing? Regarding the sale of the building, again, we've had a lot of interest now that people are sort of convinced the Plaza project will go forward. So we're trying to develop some sort of a public process. So there would be an open bidding process, but people would also have to present an idea of what they would do with the space, because we have some things that we think will really enhance the plaza, and we certainly want that type of usage in that building. So at some point we would consider both price and a project, what the usage of that building would be.
So you say you have had people approach you that are interested in purchasing?
We have several people that have talked to us in the last
month or so.
And it's appropriate to, a city can sell a building saying it has to be used for this purpose. That's an okay thing to do. Okay.
Mhm.
I would think it would be, but I'm just asking because you never know what's legal and what's not sometimes.
Does
So
this,
go ahead, Tom.
does this include the building on First West?
No,
No,
it doesn't.
No.
No, at this point, we're just sitting on that. It's an asset. It's certainly not going down in value. So we haven't yet determined what the long-term purpose of that will be.
All right.
And not only is it not going down in value, we're collecting a market rate rent on it every month. So
Kurt, I was just gonna say, I think it's funny that you found a portable ice rink in Carmel, Indiana. That's where I lived there when I was in junior high.
Oh, you did?
And they had cows in the middle of town.
That town has changed so much. I went back there about 3 years ago and it's so cool what they've done with their downtown. So
That seems so remarkable to me.
So one question, I know we've gone over this individually and in past meetings, but just for public that might be listening, what is the balance currently in our RDA funds as far as being able to cover this request?
we've got about $10.4 million is our fund balance. Now, a lot of that's been allocated, for different projects, even recently with like Mill Creek and L59 and Blue Springs Business Park. After allocating the expenditures for this project, that's a really good question. We've got about $1 million in surplus cash, but we also have the value of Plaza 45 itself not factored into that $1 million. So we've got various assets, that could be sold. The property at 46 North, 100 West, Plaza 45. Of course, we own the land recently acquired at 300 North Main, just north of the new city library. So we're in pretty good shape financially, really good shape actually, to be able to absorb the costs associated with the project.
Okay. And the central, the RDA for this, remind me of the expiration date of it.
The downtown RDA expires December of 2022.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
2 years.
Yep.
I have no more questions. I promise when I say it this time, I have no more questions.
Lots of questions. All right, Tom, Jeannie, Ernesto.
I'm good.
All right, we've got some people I think that will make comments in a couple weeks. So, all right, Kirk, want to move on to the next one?
You bet. So resolution 21-12 RDA is really all about sourcing the funds. Where do the funds come from to carry out the project with the Center Block Plaza? So it's proposed that the improvements that you've seen here just in this first discussion, as well as eliminating the deficit in the downtown RDA that resulted from acquiring the property where this plaza will be built. It's proposed that those funds will come via transfer from other agency project area fund balances. And Utah RDA law allows for that when the cost of that, where the cost of the installation of publicly owned infrastructure and improvements, in this case, that's what the Central Block Plaza is, when it benefits the project area or project areas from which the funds are sourced. So we're really, in simple words, we're talking about you, the RDA board, making a determination that the funds that will be transferred from other fund balances of other project areas benefit those project areas. And in fact, the way that resolution's written, that it will benefit all project areas within the redevelopment agency. And we certainly believe that's the case. I mean, this project's significant, it's highly visible. It's right in the core of our commercial district. It will have not just a local neighborhood draw, but it will influence, you know, several neighborhoods and really all parts of the valley, I think.
Old Valley.
Any questions?
Told you it was my last question. I told you it was my last-
All right. Anyone? Okay. Is that the extent of our workshops for tonight? Excellent. All right. Again, thank you all for your patience and for your time and your willingness to be here and to present. And if there's no other questions, we will adjourn for tonight. Thank you all so much. Have a good night.
Barry Anderson.